At the start of every NBA season, we have our teams that we just expect to be title contenders. Teams like the Boston Celtics, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Brooklyn Nets. And we even have our sleeper teams like the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic. But every single year, there are going to be some very underrated teams. Teams that are performing well but are still not talked about in the mainstream media. In this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 most underrated teams through the first week of the NBA season. But before we get into that, be sure you guys do head over and click that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you do not miss out on future content. Coming in at number 5, we have one of the few undefeated teams in the NBA, the Indiana Pacers. Now I know a lot of you guys probably think the Pacers should be higher on this list, but let me explain why. The Indiana Pacers are 3-0 and they just beat the Boston Celtics with a game winner with Domantas Sabonis, who has been having himself a really good year. The Pacers may be better than every other team on this list, but this is an underrated list, not the best list. The Pacers are actually starting to be talked a little bit more in the mainstream media after a buzzer beater versus the Boston Celtics. That being said, the Indiana Pacers are a small market team because they're based in Indiana, and there's nothing really in Indiana. But this team actually has potential to make the playoffs and maybe even make a run. With star Domantas Sabonis on their roster, along with Victor Oladipo, TJ Warren, and Miles Turner, this Indiana Pacers team has a lot of really good players, and they know how to play together. It's not like this roster has been assembled this year and they have some chemistry to work out. This team has been together for a couple of years and they're finally starting to come into their own. But the big question for the Pacers is about Victor Oladipo, their star, coming off an injury and his season being slowed down. But with the looks of how Domantas Sabonis is playing this year, who knows? Coming in at number 4, we got the New Orleans Pelicans. Maybe some of you guys think this team should be number 1, but again, this is an underrated list, not the best teams, because the Pelicans are also a very good team. The reason the Pelicans aren't higher on this list is because they do have some hype and they also got some eyes on them coming into this season with a young Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and Lonzo Ball. They also added Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe to this roster. The reason I put the Pelicans on this list because game 1, they took on the Raptors in Toronto and came away with a huge win, winning 113-99. They went and played the Eastern Conference champions, the Miami Heat, and they lost. But despite this loss, Brandon Ingram is looking really solid and actually earned himself Player of the Week by the NBA. Zion Williamson is starting to play more minutes, which was the huge issue last year, and pretty much led to the firing of Coach Alvin Gentry. This year, Zion Williamson is averaging 35 minutes a game, which is a huge difference from last season. Lonzo Ball is also playing better. He's taking more shots, and in both of the wins for the Pelicans, he scored 16 each. The ceiling for the Pelicans is unknown. Who knows what this team can become? Who knows if they can make the playoffs? But one thing for sure, this team has a lot of potential. And I think soon they'll be talked way more about in the mainstream media. At number 3, we have the Sacramento Kings. Who do you know ever talks about the Sacramento Kings? The mainstream media never mentions the Kings, and this probably is because they're in Sacramento, which isn't the biggest city. But despite this, they have a rising star in De'Aaron Fox, who also isn't talked about a lot. The Sacramento Kings have started off the season 2-1, and they have 2 wins versus 2 very solid teams in the West. One on the road versus the Nuggets, and the next versus the Phoenix Suns, with a new and improved roster with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. They have lost to the Suns the game after that, but they're still playing really good. In the first game, you guys saw Buddy Hield get a tip in for the win, and honestly, I believe Buddy Hield is very underrated, and people will soon start talking about him. In the first game, Buddy Hield played 41 minutes and scored 22 points, including the game winner, and De'Aaron Fox scored 21 and 7. Also, don't forget the Sacramento Kings still have Harrison Barnes, who is a really solid player, and Marvin Bagley. Honestly, I truly believe De'Aaron Fox can average over 23 points a game this season, and Buddy Hield could average a solid 17. And I feel like a lot of people still forget about Harrison Barnes, who was part of that 2015-2016 championship for the Golden State Warriors. The Kings just really lay low underneath the radar, and that's why they are number 3 on this list, above the Pelicans and the Pacers. Maybe the Kings aren't as good as a team as those two teams, but they certainly do not get as much media attention as the Pacers and the Pelicans. Hopefully the NBA will start recognizing the Kings a little bit more, and people will start watching De'Aaron Fox a little bit more closely. And coming in at number 2, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers are one of the few undefeated teams left in the NBA, and nobody would have thought it. Coming into the season, everybody had the Cavaliers as one of the worst teams because last season, they didn't play good. Last season, they finished 19-63 and finished the season losing 10 in a row. Nobody had the Cleveland Cavaliers on the radar, and that is why they are so high on this list. And to make things even better for the Cavaliers, Collin Sexton might have a chance to win Most Improved Player this year. Last season, Collin Sexton averaged 20 points on 47% shooting. This season so far, he's averaging 27 points per game on almost 60% from the field. Also, he's passing the ball a little bit more, which was the concern last year. And the Cavs have a lot of young players like Garland, Kevin Porter Jr., and their rookie Isaac Okoro, who's playing pretty good. They also added JaVale McGee to their roster, who's actually been a pretty solid addition. And one of the most underrated players in the NBA is on the Cleveland Cavaliers, Andre Drummond. Andre Drummond consistently puts up some of the best statistics you will see out of any big in the NBA, and nobody talks about him. And on top of that, they still have future Hall of Famer Kevin Love. If Collin Sexton is able to keep this game up, and Andre Drummond keeps doing his thing, Garland is going to do his thing, and another underrated player, Cedi Osman, who's been playing pretty good, keeps doing their thing, who knows what the Cavs can do. Maybe the Cavs could even make the playoffs because the East isn't that strong, especially after watching a couple of the first games. If you're wondering how the Cavs aren't even number 1, and maybe that's what you were expecting, but the reason I have them at number 2 and not number 1 is because their schedule isn't too hard. Yes, they played the Philadelphia 76ers, but the Sixers were without their best player, Joel Embiid. But that being said, the Cavs kind of killed the Sixers, and the Sixers still had Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris playing. But their other wins come against the Pistons and Hornets, and we still really don't know who the Hornets are after they upset the Nets against Kevin Durant and Kyrie. And the Pistons honestly aren't playing good to start the season. But I'm not going to discredit what the Cavaliers are doing. Collin Sexton is playing great, Drummond is doing his thing, Cedi Osman's doing his thing, and they still have Kevin Love and Garland. On top of that, their bench is looking pretty solid too. Let me know what you guys think the Cavs are going to do this season. If you guys haven't liked the video, be sure to give this video a like. It helps the channel out. And subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. Also, consider following my Twitter. I tweet a lot about the NBA. Alright, with that being said, the number 1 most underrated team in the first week of the NBA season is the Orlando Magic. Now, the Orlando Magic made the playoffs last year, and starting the season, still, nobody talked about them. If you think of the Orlando Magic, you don't really have any player that comes to mind, maybe Vucevic or Aaron Gordon because of his dunks. But the Orlando Magic have a really solid team. In the season opener versus the defending Eastern Conference champions, the Miami Heat, the Orlando Magic won 113-107. In that game, the Orlando Magic had 5 players score over 15 points, including Aaron Gordon, Nikola Vucevic, Evan Fournier, Markelle Fultz, and Terrence Ross. After this, they went to Washington, where they scored 130 points and beat the Washington Wizards against Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, who both had a really terrific outing. After that, they had a back-to-back game against the Wizards again, and they won 120-113, and Westbrook and Beal had another solid outing. But still, you don't hear about these games. You just hear about how Westbrook got his triple-doubles and Bradley Beal is filling up the box score. How often do you guys hear about Markelle Fultz in the news? Maybe the last time you heard that name was probably the memes about how he's a bust. But Markelle Fultz is far from a bust. So far in the 3 games that the Magic has played, he's averaging 20 points a game. Also, another player that is not talked about is Evan Fournier, who consistently puts up over 20 points every single game. The Orlando Magic don't really have a superstar, but they have lots of good players and lots of players that could score. Terrence Ross is literally a microwave on the court and can heat up whenever he wants to. Maybe the Magic aren't going to be the team to win the finals, but they're going to make the playoffs again, and nobody's going to talk about them. Everybody consistently doubts the Orlando Magic. Actually, they can't even doubt the Orlando Magic because they don't even know they exist. Sometimes it feels like the Magic haven't been a basketball team since they had Dwight Howard. Maybe now, after their 3-0 start on the season, people will start giving the recognition that the Orlando Magic deserve. Did I leave any teams out? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Give me your top 5 underrated teams after the first week of NBA basketball. Also, do not forget to subscribe and hit that like button. I hope you guys have a blessed morning, blessed day, blessed night, whenever you're listening to this. This is ZTAY. Peace.